My name is Audrey Thompson. I'm 35 years old, a single mother, a survivor of emotional abuse. And this morning, I made the biggest mistake of my life. I picked up the phone when my mother called. I hadn't heard her voice in 3 years, not since I packed my bags, took my then 4-year-old daughter Lily by the hand, and walked out of the Thompson estate without a single backward glance. I thought I had finally shut the door on the pain. The manipulation, the unbearable silence that had followed every time I tried to speak up for myself. But today, the voice that once broke me sounded soft, gentle, almost regretful. "Audrey, sweetheart, it's been too long. Come home for spring break. Just for a few days. For Lily. Don't you think it's time we move past it all?" Past what? The time you accused me of being unstable when I cried at Derek's wedding, the time you told me my postpartum depression was just attention-seeking behavior. Or maybe the time I begged you to protect Lily from Derek's temper, and you brushed it off as he's just under pressure. But I didn't say any of that, because there's a cruel part of me still scarred and fragile that wanted it to be true, that wanted to believe my mother had changed, that perhaps now, finally, we could be a family again. And maybe Lily deserved a shot at that, even if I never had one. So I said yes. We arrived at the Thompson estate on a Thursday afternoon. Just as the Georgia spring burst into bloom, the house stood like a perfectly polished illusion, white columns, manicured hedges, even the scent of Eleanor Thompson's award-winning roses wafting through the driveway. Everything about it screamed perfection. But I knew better. I'd lived inside this dollhouse of dysfunction. As we pulled up, Lily leaned forward in her booster seat, her eyes wide. "Mom, it's so big, like a castle." I smiled, masking the tight knot forming in my stomach. "It looks pretty on the outside. But remember what we talked about, sweetie. If anything feels wrong, you come straight to me." Lily nodded. She's a bright, intuitive little girl, too intuitive for her own good sometimes. The front door opened before we even rang the bell. There she stood, Eleanor Thompson, in a pastel blue pantsuit, every hair in place, her signature pearls glinting in the light. Beside her was Sterling, my father, still the towering figure with a politician's smile and the coldest eyes I've ever seen. "Welcome home," my mother said, her arms extended as if this were a Hallmark reunion. "Look at you. And this must be Lily. What a darling girl." I tensed as she bent down to hug Lily, her movements rehearsed like she'd practiced warmth in a mirror. Lily hugged back politely, but I caught the way her small hands didn't squeeze. Inside, the house was a museum of memories I'd spent years trying to forget. Photographs lined the hallway, every single one featuring Derek. My older brother, Derek at graduation, Derek with Dad at a hunting lodge, Derek shaking hands with the mayor. There wasn't a single photo of me past the age of 14. Even in memory, I'd been erased. That night, we gathered in the grand dining room for the family reunion dinner. Long mahogany table, crystal glasses, silver cutlery, and, of course, Derek. He arrived late, as always, with his trophy wife Natalie clinging to his side like she didn't have a mind of her own. He didn't look at me, just gave a nod as he passed and leaned down to kiss Mom's cheek. "Sorry we're late. Had to take a call from Tokyo. IPO stuff. You know how it is." I didn't. And I didn't care. Derek could bathe in his stock options for all I cared, as long as he stayed away from my daughter. The conversation at dinner was hollow, full of words and devoid of meaning. Sterling talked about a new defense contract. Eleanor bragged about her philanthropic board's latest gala. Derek flexed about venture capital and how soft the younger generation had become. I kept my eyes on Lily. She was trying to eat politely, even as she reached for the wrong fork 3 times and blushed each time. My mother noticed. She's a sweet girl, but a little unrefined. You should consider enrolling her in our etiquette program. Audrey, they do wonders with manners. I swallowed. She's 7. Mom, let her be a child. Children reflect their upbringing. There it was, the dig. I glanced at Derek, waiting for his signature smirk, but he wasn't paying attention to Lily. He was watching me, studying me, like a predator who hasn't decided whether you're worth the kill. I felt cold. After dinner, Lily wandered into the music room and found the old baby grand. She loves to sing, has perfect pitch and a voice like soft sunlight. She started humming Somewhere Over the Rainbow, her tiny fingers pressing keys gently. Eleanor entered the room first. Oh no, sweetheart, that's not appropriate for now. Then Derek. He stared at her for a beat, then said clear as day, still doing the weird singing thing like her mother. Lily stopped. Her hands froze mid-note. I stepped in instantly. Excuse me. Derek didn't even look at me. It's disruptive. She doesn't know how to read the room. Maybe get her tested. Derek, Natalie whispered. She's just a kid. A kid who'll end up just like her mother if someone doesn't intervene. He snapped. My hands clenched. My jaw locked. I didn't shout. I didn't throw the glass of wine I was holding. But inside, I felt something shatter. Lily turned to me, her face pale. Did I do something wrong? That did it. No, baby, I whispered. You did everything right. You always do. I took her hand and walked her upstairs. Behind me, no one followed, no one apologized. Not one adult in that room stood up for a 7-year-old child being humiliated for daring to have a voice. That night, after Lily fell asleep curled into my arms, I opened my suitcase and found the velvet pouch Tara had given me. Inside was a tiny digital recorder built into a pendant shaped like a teardrop. You're not crazy, she had told me, but just in case they try to gaslight you again, record everything. I hesitated. Then I placed the pendant on the vanity, where it could pick up sound from the hallway and the sitting room downstairs. And I waited, because something told me. The real show hadn't even started yet. That night, I barely slept. My mind ran in tight circles around the room. Through every glance, every offhand comment, every carefully sharpened insult disguised as concern, I could feel that something was happening beneath the surface. The Thompsons didn't do anything without a motive. And this sudden invitation, this curated family reunion felt too perfect. Too timed. Lily's innocent singing had touched some nerve. And Derek's reaction wasn't just cruel, it was calculated. I laid awake, holding her close, and listened to the faint murmur of voices downstairs. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable, hushed, urgent, collusive. My instincts were no longer whispering, they were screaming. At 6 a.m, I woke quietly and checked the recording. The pendant had captured just over an hour of audio. I locked the door, put on headphones, and pressed play for the first few minutes. It was muffled sounds of clinking glasses and footsteps. Then, Eleanor's voice cut through. Clear and sharp. She's still unstable. It's obvious. Look how she overreacted last night. She's projecting her own issues onto that child. My father replied. Calm and chilling. We don't need another media fiasco. She's too unpredictable to be allowed full custody. Especially if that Tokyo fund comes through. We can't risk her being seen at the gala either. What if she starts something? Then came Derek. Let's be honest, she was always a liability. We all knew it. This is our chance to finally fix it. Get Lily out of her hands. Push for an evaluation. I've already spoken to Dr. Mendel. He's ready to sign off on a temporary psychiatric hold. All we need is a triggering event and with her temper. It won't take long. My blood turned to ice. They weren't just judging me, they were planning to erase me. Again. Like they had with my Aunt Clara when I was 10. the one they said had gone away to rest after a breakdown. But I remember Clara. I remember how she told me, whispering through the bathroom door, that they were trying to take her name off the will. And then she disappeared. A psychiatric hold. That was the phrase they used. And now they were preparing the same fate for me, except this time I had Lily to protect. This wasn't about pride anymore. It was survival. The knock at the door snapped me out of the spiral. I yanked the headphones off and shoved the pendant back into its pouch. Audrey. It's Natalie. I hesitated, then opened the door just wide enough to see her face. She looked different. Her usual smile was gone. Her eyes were softer, unsure. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For last night. Her voice trembled. Derek was out of line. He's always been... She trailed off. I didn't say anything. She glanced down the hallway, then stepped closer. There's something you should know. I found documents in his study last week, guardianship petitions. Dated, signed, all with your name removed. My breath caught. And Lily's name on them, I asked. She nodded. They were going to file after this weekend. It's not just talk. It's real. I should have broken down, but I didn't. Something in me, something buried and dormant for years, rose up instead. Cold, clear, strategic. Do you have copies? I asked. She looked torn, afraid. Then she reached into her coat pocket and slipped me a flash drive. Keep it safe, she whispered. They'll never believe me if this comes out. As she turned to leave, I caught her wrist. Why are you helping me? Natalie paused, her voice almost inaudible. Because I was pregnant 2 years ago. Derek didn't want it. Said it would interfere with his IPO schedule. I had a miscarriage after he got angry one night. No one believed me. She looked down. I see Lily, and I see what could have been. Then she walked away. I clutched the flash drive like it was my lifeline, because it was. With this, the recording, and the right legal help, I could blow the entire operation apart. But I knew I had to move fast. They were waiting for me to snap, to scream, to shove a chair, to slam a door. They wanted a triggering event, so I'd give them one. But it wouldn't be the one they expected. That afternoon, Eleanor suggested we all go for a picnic on the east lawn. It'll be good for Lily, she said. Her tone was syrupy, too sweet to be real. I nodded and smiled, playing the role of the obedient. Fragile daughter they all remembered. Of course, I said. She'd love that. We packed into the family's white Range Rover, Derek driving, Eleanor navigating, Sterling silent behind sunglasses, Natalie stiff in the back with me and Lily between us. We drove to the edge of the estate, to the same spot where, as a child, I'd once been locked outside during a thunderstorm because I forgot to say thank you at dinner. I remembered crouching under the garden bench, soaked and shivering, while the adults finished their wine indoors. No one ever mentioned it again. I was being dramatic, they said. As we laid out the blanket and Eleanor passed around cucumber sandwiches, Derek leaned down toward Lily and said, You know, Lily, you'd be much better off here with us. Don't you think? Lily blinked, confused. But I live with Mommy. He chuckled, condescending. Of course, for now, but families change. And this is your real family, not some dingy apartment with coloring books on the floor. My hand twitched toward my glass of iced tea. I wanted to hurl it at him. Instead, I looked him dead in the eyes and said, Funny, I don't remember you coming to any of her birthdays, or hospital visits, or school plays. Eleanor jumped in, voice tight. Let's keep this civil. We're all just looking out for Lily's future. Sterling finally spoke, low and firm. Audrey, we're filing for emergency guardianship on Monday. We've already spoken to a judge. You can contest it. Of course. But with your history, it'll be an uphill battle. I didn't react. Not visibly. I simply reached into my bag, pulled out a small case, and placed it gently on the picnic blanket. Before you do that, I said, you might want to hear this. I pressed play. The recording spilled into the warm spring air. Every word Eleanor's callous judgment, Sterling's strategic planning, Derek's chilling desire to trigger me into an outburst played out like a crime drama in surround sound. No one moved. Lily looked around, wide-eyed, not quite understanding. Natalie covered her mouth. Derek lunged forward, trying to snatch the device. But I grabbed it first and stood. It's already backed up, I said coldly, and I have copies in 3 separate locations. Try me. Eleanor rose, trembling with rage. You ungrateful, but Sterling stopped her with a hand on her arm. We need to handle this privately, he said. His mask had cracked. Just enough for me to see what lay beneath the fury of a man who was losing control. I gathered Lily into my arms. We're leaving now, and if any of you try to contact us again, my lawyer will respond on my behalf. They didn't stop me. Not one of them moved. But as I walked back to the car with Lily's small hand in mine, I knew this wasn't over. They wouldn't go down without a fight, and neither would I. Because this time I wasn't running away. I was running toward the truth, toward justice, and toward the reckoning they never saw coming. The drive back to the city was quiet, almost unnaturally so. Lily fell asleep in the back seat within minutes. Her small frame curled against the window, clutching the stuffed bear she'd brought with her, the one I had stitched for her during my first week in therapy. When I was trying to learn how to breathe again, I drove in silence, my fingers locked tightly around the steering wheel. Not out of fear this time, but focus. That recording had been just the first strike. It was emotional dynamite, but emotions alone wouldn't win me the war. What I needed next was precision, evidence, leverage, and the right people to help me wield it. The moment we got home, I tucked Lily into bed and kissed her forehead. Then I locked the door to my study and opened my laptop. I didn't hesitate. I typed a single name, Anna Sharma. Anna and I had gone to college together before our lives split into separate timelines. She went into law and built a reputation as a brutal litigator with a soft spot for underdogs. 3 years ago, she took down a pharmaceutical company that had silenced victims with hush money and false medical records. She was the kind of person you called when your world was burning and you didn't want water, you wanted gasoline. She answered on the second ring. Audrey. It's been forever. I didn't waste time with small talk. I need your help. It's big. My parents are trying to take Lily. They've built a case using my medical history and staged a narrative that I'm mentally unfit. But I have a recording, and there's more documents. Witness statements. Anna didn't hesitate. Meet me tomorrow. Bring everything. I spent the rest of the night sorting through every file, every photo, every email. I opened an encrypted cloud account and uploaded the recording, the guardianship forms Natalie had given me, and a digital copy of the medical evaluation Derek had allegedly commissioned without my knowledge. I found old voicemails from my mother, saved by instinct more than intent, where she'd told me I was damaged and should be grateful we don't institutionalize you like Clara. My hands trembled slightly as I replayed them, but beneath the tremble was a flame. This wasn't weakness. This was ammunition. The next morning, Anna met me at her office downtown. Sleek, glass-walled, no frills. She listened in silence as I played the audio, showed her the documents, told her about Natalie's quiet confession, and the history of abuse buried under decades of polite silences and public philanthropy. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and exhaled slowly. They've built a legacy around silencing dissent, and they've done it so long. They don't even consider the possibility that someone could fight back and win. She tapped her pen thoughtfully. We're going to flip the script. We don't just play defense, we go on offense. We expose the whole machine. Over the next few days, we built a legal strategy like a war map. Step 1, file an official petition for a restraining order to prevent any attempt at emergency guardianship. Step 2, submit the audio as evidence of malicious intent, coupled with the forged medical evaluation, which Anna confirmed had several procedural errors. Step 3, secure affidavits from third-party witnesses who'd seen or experienced similar manipulation from the Thompsons. And this is where Paul came in. Paul had once worked as an internal auditor for Vance Defense, the military firm my father sat on the board of. He was also Clara's godson. After her disappearance, he had quietly left the firm and vanished from the public record. But through a friend of a friend, Anna managed to locate him living under a different name in Vermont. We arranged a Zoom call, and when his face appeared on screen, I almost didn't recognize him. The Paul I remembered had been confident, bold. The man before me was careful, slow to speak, but his voice held steel when he began. They did the same thing to Clara, he said. She was trying to expose fraud over billed contracts, false reports to the Pentagon. Sterling found out. He didn't threaten her directly. He didn't need to. He let her unravel publicly, pushed her toward breakdown, then used it to institutionalize her. I tried to intervene, and 2 days later, I was accused of misconduct and forced to resign. Anna leaned forward. Do you have documentation? He nodded. Emails, memos, backups. I've kept them. I was afraid. But now, if they're doing this to Audrey, they won't stop. With Paul on board, the case transformed. It wasn't just a custody issue anymore. It was a story of generational corruption, silenced women, and manufactured instability, and the press would eat it up. Still, we needed one more piece of first-hand confession, and that's where Natalie became the key. I reached out again, cautiously. She responded with a single line, I'm ready to talk, but not over the phone. We met at a quiet cafe in the Arts District. Natalie wore sunglasses and no makeup, her posture small, her voice almost imperceptible. I recorded something, she whispered. After I gave you that flash drive, Derek got suspicious. He started talking to the lawyers, openly planning how to spin the story. He said you were emotionally erratic and unattached as a mother. He said even if you fought it, no judge would hand full custody to a woman with a known history of hysteria. My fists clenched under the table. Natalie pulled out her phone and handed me an audio file. Use it. And Audrey. Protect her. Protect Lily. As I left the cafe, a weight settled over me, not of fear, but of responsibility. People were trusting me to do what no one had ever done in the Thompson family: break the silence, tear the legacy down to its bones. Anna wasted no time. She filed an emergency brief with the county court attaching all 3 recordings, Paul's affidavit, and Natalie's statement. The restraining order was granted within hours. But that wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Because now, the Thompsons knew I wasn't just reacting. I was fighting. And they'd come for me. Not with fists, but with everything they had: connections, influence, image. The next morning, I opened my email to find a notice from a journalist at the Herald Tribune requesting a comment on an anonymous tip alleging I had emotionally endangered my daughter. A fabricated claim, carefully worded. Smearing me in public would be their first counterstrike. I didn't respond, not yet, because the next move was mine, and I wasn't going to waste it on words. I had something better. Truth. And this time, it was louder than their lies. The morning the article dropped, I didn't flinch. I didn't even read past the headline. Ex-heiress spirals allegations of emotional instability. threatened custody of minor daughter. It was a carefully constructed hit piece, anonymous sources, vague mental health innuendos, and just enough half-truths to muddy the waters without crossing into outright libel. Classic Thompson strategy: twist the narrative, cast doubt, let the whispers do the rest. They weren't trying to win in court, they were trying to win in the court of public opinion. But what they didn't know was that I was already 2 steps ahead. Anna and I had spent the last week laying the groundwork for our counterstrike. Every article they released, every whisper they seeded, every backdoor conversation they leaked, we documented it all. But instead of firing back immediately, we let it simmer. We let them get comfortable. Arrogance was their Achilles' heel. And we'd learned long ago that the Thompsons always overplayed their hand when they thought no one was watching. They wanted a scandal, fine. But it would be our scandal, on our terms. The day before the emergency hearing on guardianship, Anna called a friend in media relations, someone who owed her a favor. Within hours, a verified Instagram account belonging to a former Vance defense employee leaked the first audio clip: Derek discussing the plan to trigger my outburst, manipulate court documentation, and secure temporary psychiatric hold. It spread like wildfire. Twitter threads dissected every word. TikToks popped up with text overlays like, "This man wants to steal his sister's child, listen to this." My inbox exploded, but so did theirs. Natalie messaged me quietly, saying Derek had lost it, screaming at her, threatening to sue her for defamation. But the damage was done. The perfect image was cracking. Next, Paul's story was published in a long-form exposé by an independent investigative blog. It detailed Clara's disappearance, the internal fraud at Vance Defense, and Sterling's long history of burying scandals under non-disclosure agreements and strategic psychiatric accusations. It wasn't mainstream yet, but it was boiling beneath the surface. Anna knew it was time to go public ourselves. We filmed a statement. It wasn't flashy, no tears, just me, sitting at my kitchen table, with Lily's crayon drawings in the background, calmly outlining what had happened. I spoke clearly, factually, and with a controlled emotion that only made the truth cut deeper. I didn't attack. I didn't accuse. I simply presented the facts paired with audio excerpts, legal documents, and the timeline of abuse that no longer fit under the rug. Within hours, it went viral. And suddenly, the narrative shifted. No longer was I the unhinged heiress. I was the daughter who had survived, the mother who had protected, the woman who had receipts. Still, the courtroom was where it would all be decided. That morning, I wore a navy blue suit, clean, strong lines, not somber, not submissive, controlled, calm. Lily was at home with Tara, who had flown in to stay with us. I kissed her forehead before I left and promised, "No one is going to take you away from me, ever." The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Anna sat beside me, calm as stone, her folders arranged with surgical precision. Across from us, Derek, jaw tight, his legal team stone-faced. Eleanor, elegant in black, playing the role of grieving matriarch. Sterling, unreadable behind his glasses. The judge was a woman in her 50s, sharp, no nonsense. I could tell she wasn't interested in theatrics. Derek's lawyer went first, painting a picture of me as unstable, reclusive, emotionally erratic. They cited my therapy records, my past struggles with anxiety after childbirth, and even brought up my decision to homeschool Lily temporarily during the pandemic as isolationist behavior. It was a character assassination, slick, practiced, rehearsed. Then it was Anna's turn. She didn't waste time. She played the recordings, one by one. Each statement echoed in the courtroom like a hammer on stone. She showed the medical report forged by Derek's contact, The guardianship paperwork predating any so-called outburst. The proof that this wasn't concern, it was a coup. Then she called Natalie. Everyone turned when she entered, dressed simply, trembling slightly, but steady. She took the stand, raised her right hand, and told the truth. About Derek's temper, about the miscarriage, about the fear, and about the moment she realized she was complicit in a system designed to erase inconvenient women. I watched Sterling's face for a reaction. Nothing, not even a blink. Finally, Paul joined via video link. He laid out the pattern Clara, the cover-ups, the culture of fear and gaslighting that existed under the Thompson name. He didn't cry. He didn't shout. He simply gave truth a voice. When it was over, the room was quiet. The judge called for a recess, and we stepped outside. I felt lightheaded, not from fear, but from the sheer emotional weight of everything that had just unfolded. It wasn't over. Not yet, but the tide had shifted. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one being questioned. They were. We reconvened that afternoon for the judge's decision on temporary custody and the restraining order. She didn't look at anyone in particular as she read her ruling, but her voice carried finality. Based on the evidence presented, including audio recordings, sworn affidavits, and material documentation, this court finds substantial concern regarding the petitioner's motives and conduct. Emergency guardianship is denied. Full custody remains with the mother. A protective order is hereby granted to prohibit contact from the petitioners to the child or her primary caregiver until further review. I didn't cry. I didn't gasp. I just breathed. For the first time in years, I could actually breathe. But I knew it wasn't the end. Because men like Sterling didn't stop. They regrouped. And this time, I needed to strike before they could rebuild. I wish I could say that winning the courtroom battle was the end. That after the ruling, the Thompsons faded into the background, and I finally got to live the quiet life I always dreamed of, with Lily's laughter filling the house, and my trauma tucked safely away, like old winter clothes I'd never wear again. But that's not how stories like mine end. Not when the enemy isn't just one person or one lie, but a system built on manipulation, appearances, and silence. Because when people like Sterling Thompson lose control, they don't disappear, they escalate. 2 days after the ruling, I received a notice from a bank I didn't even remember opening an account with. It claimed I had defaulted on a business loan I had never taken. Then my apartment lease was suddenly flagged for review due to complaints of neglectful parenting. Next came a strange visit from Child Protective Services, triggered by an anonymous report that Lily was often left alone and possibly emotionally abused. It was surgical, targeted, legal harassment in the form of bureaucratic knives, and I knew exactly who was behind it. But what they didn't understand was that I wasn't that same woman anymore. I didn't crumble. I documented everything. I forwarded every notice to Anna. I installed surveillance in my apartment. I pulled Lily from school temporarily and hired a child psychologist to assess her on my terms. And when the CPS officer met Lily, all she saw was a bright, articulate, emotionally stable child who knew she was loved and safe. Their report came back clean. Every attempt to make me look unstable only ended up reinforcing the truth I was standing on solid ground, and they were grasping at shadows. Still, I knew I needed a final strike, something that wouldn't just protect me, but expose the entire machinery they'd built. Because what if one day they went after someone else? What if they found another woman like Clara, or another child like Lily? The thought haunted me more than any threat they could send. So I reached out to Isabel Thorne, an investigative journalist who had written extensively about institutional abuse and corporate cover-ups. I gave her everything: Paul's documents, Clara's timeline, Natalie's testimony, The court audio, not as a victim, but as a witness, a whistleblower, a woman done being erased. She worked for weeks, confirming facts, interviewing off-record sources, digging into sealed settlements linked to Vance's defense. And then, one Sunday morning, the story dropped. Front page, The House of Silence, how a defense dynasty quietly erased women for decades. It was explosive, for the first time. My family name wasn't paired with privilege or power. It was paired with pattern, with proof, and with pain. Public reaction was instant. Shares plummeted. Sterling stepped down from 2 major boards within 48 hours. Former employees came forward with their own stories. Clara's name trended online, no longer just a footnote, but a face to a forgotten legacy. Eleanor released a statement through her PR firm denying involvement. Derek threatened to sue 3 outlets for defamation, but no suit ever materialized. Their fortress of silence had cracked, and no amount of polished press releases could glue it back together. That night, I sat with Lily on our tiny living room floor, painting stars on her ceiling with glow-in-the-dark stickers. She laughed when one fell on her head, and I realized how long it had been since I heard her laugh freely, without tension in her shoulders or caution in her voice. We talked about clouds and dinosaurs, and why jelly beans taste better on Tuesdays. She didn't know the war I had just won for her, and she didn't need to, because the only thing she should ever fight for at her age is the last piece of chocolate after dinner. A few weeks later, I received a letter, handwritten, no return address. I recognized the handwriting immediately. Clara. Inside was a single sheet of paper. You did what I couldn't. Thank you for saving us, even the ones already gone. I read it twice before folding it gently and locking it in the box with all the other truths I refused to bury. Clara had been watching, surviving, somewhere out there. She had found enough peace to write again, and that was its own kind of justice. Months passed. Tara eventually convinced me to move north to a small coastal town in Maine, where life moved slower, and people knew each other's dogs by name. We bought a modest house with a screened-in porch, and Lily started at a new school where no one knew her last name, only her laughter. Anna visited once, bringing a bottle of wine and a grin. You know, she said, you could have gone for the throat. Pressed charges, civil suits. You could have taken them for everything. I nodded. I didn't want to become them. I just wanted it to end. She smiled. Then you've won more than most. In the quiet nights that followed, I sometimes wondered if they'd try again, if Sterling would pull strings behind the scenes, if Derek would find a new narrative, a new lie. But then I'd watch Lily sleep, her chest rising and falling in peace, and I knew that whatever came next, I was no longer alone. I had allies. I had evidence. And more importantly, I had the truth, and that was something they could never erase again. I kept one copy of the recording, burned onto an encrypted USB, locked in a drawer not out of fear, but as a reminder, not of them, but of me, of the voice I found, the battle I fought, and the silence I broke. In the end, revenge wasn't about destroying them. It was about reclaiming myself. And that, finally, was enough.